Hey everyone, I'm Patri Friedman of the Seasteading Institute in Pronomus Capital. Talking to you from the Dubai International Financial Center, one of my inspirations. Finally got to visit and stay here. So I guess my interest for 20 years or so has been how can we make new jurisdictions so that we can try out new, better legal systems and political systems and types of society. I was kind of looking for a new country to live in the early 2000s. And I was like, there's nowhere that appeals to me. There's nowhere that aligns with my values, and very few places that are even effectively run. What's going on here? And there'd been there's a lot of tendency in our minds, I think, to say, oh, what's going on is that people don't believe the right things, or they didn't elect the right people, or they didn't listen to me enough. And I try to take a business approach and say, well, wait a second, let's think about governments as businesses and the entire government world of governments as an industry. And just look at the characteristics. And what are the characteristics of this industry? It's got an incredibly high barrier to entry. How do you make a new country? Winning an election is not enough, right? You win an election, you can barely change anything. You basically have to win a revolution or somehow manage to succeed. Incredibly difficult. So there's no startups. And then what's the cost of switching, right? In the digital world, you can switch between networks, websites, whatever, very quickly and easily. And in the real world, having to change where you live, your friends, your job in the old days, still somewhat now, your property, it's a big deal. And when you have an industry that has a very high barrier to entry, like no startups, and a very high cost of switching, meaning that customers are locked into their current provider, that industry, whatever it is, forget morality, forget who's elected as CEO, whatever industry that is, it's going to have terrible innovation and terrible customer service, because that's just what naturally flows from those rules. And so I said, all right, if I want to fix this, we have to figure out ways of changing these things. And I focused on lowering the barrier to entry to entering the government industry, AKA how do we make startup countries? So I've been working on this stuff for about 20 years. I started out looking at building on the ocean, because back then in the early 2000s, all land is claimed. I didn't know about Liberland, and countries were not at all willing to work with us. So I looked to the ocean, and that turned out to be incredible at getting a lot of people excited. And we're finally starting to build some of these in Panama. And so that's great. But then in 2009, Paul Romer had this charter cities idea, although his approach was kind of wrong. He imagined a first world country would run a city in a developing country. And that doesn't work, because developed countries don't want to run cities in other countries. Even China doesn't want to do it. They just want soft power. And developing countries don't want somebody else having territory in their country. So that's just DOA. But this general idea, looking at the model of DIFC, which has English language commercial law, completely independent courts, totally different legal system within the sovereignty of Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. So that's really neat. So how can we do that? And then Honduras in 2010 changed their constitution to try to create this program. And I got really excited. I've been wanting to leave Seasteading Institute and do a startup in the space. We were looking at medical tourism cruise ships. But when the Honduras thing happened, I said, let's do that. With a group of people, I started, I guess, the first modern charter city company, Future Cities Development. We got the first MOU with Honduras in 2012. And then we realized after a bit that this was just a big project for them. And it was going to take them some time, kind of more time than my founding team could really sit around for. So we wound up and gave the money back to the investors. And, indeed, Honduras was able to successfully launch their program with the first approval in 2017 and the first openings of physical space in 2020 and 2021, but it was too long for us. Anyway, so then I continued working on being interested in these ideas, and some combination of crypto and kind of who it inspired and who it gave wealth to, and changes in how countries think of themselves in the 21st century, countries thinking of themselves more like startups, especially the smaller countries, realizing that, okay, there may be diseconomies of scale in their economy, in their military, but in terms of them being small and then not working very well, economies of scale that they don't have. But in government, there seems to be just diseconomies of scale, meaning that larger countries work worse. And it makes sense, right? If you think about the number of degrees of separation that you have from the president, or just, democracy, I think of it as just a system that doesn't scale very well. It's kind of neat. It's better than many prior systems. It scales terribly to 100 million people. And so, thinking about those things and seeing those trends, In 2017, I decided to start Pronomos Capital, which is the world's first charter city investment fund. Raised about $12 million from some Silicon Valley luminaries, starting with Peter Thiel, Balaji Srinivasan, Joe Lonsdale, Naval Ravikant, Mark Andreessen, who invented the web browser, just a few guys. And I was lucky enough to have them kind of see and share this vision of how we can treat companies like businesses, how we can view law as code or as an information technology. It's not like a shallow metaphor. Like, law is code. It's sets of instructions in text executed by people. In a digital world, some of that can be executed by programs, and there are certain judgment inputs that would need to come from people. And law is an information technology, meaning we can open source it. My advisor, Tom Bell, is working on this with ULEX, an open source legal system. You can fork it. Like, okay, I want to use Delaware corporate law in my country, but I want to modify these 27 things about it. You just fork and patch. You can integrate patches back up into the main line, right? You can do all of these things we do in software engineering with law. So that's something we're really excited about. Those are kind of like two of the foundational insights. And so we've made 6 investments right now, and we're looking into creating a new fund, which is going to have a little bit of a broader thesis, including charter cities, but also things like crypto projects that relate to governance and jurisdictions, urban tech, new ways of building cities, gov tech, new ways of making governments function better, kind of all these things related to making new cities, new societies, and new countries.